Hi there y'all, and welcome to Millennial Travels, a series on different travel destinations. On this episode, I'm visiting Baltimore to experience its rich history while enjoying some of the simpler joys that only a city like it can offer. Let's get right into it. My flight to Baltimore was simply awesome, in that I was able to get a whole row to myself. At first, I thought it was going to be packed with some other folks. As I saw the number of people began to dwindle, it became apparent that a lot of us, including myself, would be getting an unexpected upgrade for our trip to Baltimore. Upon arriving at BWI, I hopped on the Baltimore Light Rail, which has trains arriving roughly every 30 minutes. The fare was cheap at $2, which was one of the cheaper instances for me to get to the city from a major airport. The train itself was fairly smooth, with the rougher parts being when it changed paths. Otherwise, the train got me to Camden Yards, which luckily was close to my hotel. Due to the timing that I arrived there wasn't much I could do, so I grabbed some grub and prepped for the next day, which was going to be jam-packed. So every journey begins with a single step, or a hearty breakfast for me. The hotel that I got served a good continental breakfast, which had a great selection of fruits, pastries, sausages, eggs, yogurt, and other trappings of the American breakfast. With my belly full, I set off for the Enoch Pratt Free Library, which was a free library that serviced the public by providing lots of study areas and other spots for those needing a quiet place to do some studying or reading. What drew me here was the architecture and some of the beautiful paintings that were hanging in the main room of the library. After the library, I headed to the fantastic Walters Museum. The museum itself had some awesome exhibits and interior design. Now, I'll be the last one to get into the debate on designing a room, but with this place, I loved how the rooms matched with the items they housed. For example, the Renaissance one had high walls, arched ceilings, and wallpaper that looked like it was ripped from some period piece. They also had a variety of items from different eras, from the Syrian stone tablets, Egyptian busts, old European paintings, and some vases from Greece and the Asian Pacific. My favorite things of the museum was easily the design of the building, but if someone forced me to pick an item, I'd have to go with the old stone chest. There's just something about old ancient carved stones that just fascinates me. After the museum, I headed to Baltimore's own Washington Monument, which isn't as big as the DC version, but it's still worthy of a visit. Normally, visitors can walk to the top to view the city from the 4 openings at the top. Unfortunately, due to some recent storms, the lighting in the staircase was knocked out, so they weren't allowing any visitors to the top. For those who were wanting to get an idea of what the top view would have looked like, they have some podiums at the bottom that have a touchscreen display where you can view the tower in a 360-degree angle of the city. So, best thing that you can get if you can't go to the top. After some quick shots, I headed to the Peabody Library, where I found out that the place was closed despite me seeing that it was open online. And while that sucked, not being able to see 2 cool places, I figured that, well, there's always another time to revisit Baltimore. With 2 strikes in a row, I decided to go east, seeking answers along with guidance in other aspects of my life. Luckily, I found them at the Ministry of Brewing, which had a welcoming atmosphere and good drinks to ease a weary traveling soul. So for context, the Ministry of Brewing set up shop in a church building after the old owners left. A lot of the old furnishings are still inside, including some of the religious paintings. They also have events going on different days of the week, along with some local food trucks that pop on by to add some food to the mix. For my visit, I simply got a flight to kick back and rest a bit before I set off for the next leg of my journey. With some good drinks under my belt, I set off for Patterson Park, or Hampstead Hill, where a major battle of the War of 1812 was fought. The park was a short walk up the road from the Ministry of Brewing. The main thing that drew me here was a pagoda, which had a nice unique look that you don't really often see in the US, and plus, the thing has been there since 1891. With a pagoda though, you can't go inside or go up the tower, so at least you can look at it from the outside. Now the park itself was pretty large, with a lot of wide footpaths and greenery for those who just want to enjoy some lazy days in the park, or those who want to get in some daily exercise in. For me though, my daily exercise was just beginning, as I had to go to the Canton Waterfront Park to start the next leg of my journey. When I got to that point, I took some shots of the surrounding area and began to walk along the north side of the harbor with the intention of walking every possible corner until I reached the USS Constellation. Well, to say it was a walk was an understatement, but a good one though. There was something about walking along the harbor's edge that was energizing for me. It might be because, like with the Philly area, it had a lot of history and it made it much easier to imagine someone else walking along the same general area so many years ago. Outside of the nerdy history stuff, I simply enjoyed it because it felt like I would always see something different along the way. But in general, it was just relaxing to walk along the edge, while getting some shots in every so often. Now sometimes walking a city can be daunting, especially if I'm going at it for several hours, but it seems like anytime when I'm on these marches I discover something cool along the way. In this instance, it was the top of the world observation level at Baltimore's World Trade Center. At first I wasn't sure about paying to go up to the top, as I didn't know about this place when I was doing my research. Well, honestly, it was worth it and then some. The admission was about $8, and when compared to a helicopter ride, it's vastly cheaper if the mission is just to get some awesome views of the city. Once you reach the observation deck, you'll find that there's windows on all sides, and there's always a spot where you can get a great view of the city. Just be sure to time your visit right, because if you come later in the day, it can be difficult for you to take pics of the city, which happened to me because of the setting sun. Other than that, I'm glad I found this place randomly along my trek that day. So after that, I simply moseyed my way up the road to get some food from a local Thai place and called it a night to get some rest to be ready for the next day. After another hearty breakfast, I got an Uber to reach Fort McHenry. Now, for the fort itself, it covers a decent plot of land where you can walk amongst the old walls, barracks, and other fortifications that made this place a tough cookie to crack. If you're wanting to learn more about the fort, there are some exhibits within the different buildings on that land that gives you an idea of what it was like being stationed at the fort, along with some of the design aspects of the fort, including an early version of a bomb shelter. Luckily for me, I got to see a lot of unique things while I was at the fort. The first thing was that they were celebrating Defenders Day, which celebrates the battle where Baltimore repelled the British during the War of 1812. They had folks dressed up in time period outfits from that era, so that was definitely a treat. The other bonuses was getting to see the Pride of Baltimore sailing near the fort and witnessing a citizenship ceremony within the courtyard of this historic fort. After the fort, I hopped on a scooter to head to the Baltimore Museum of Industry. So the bread and butter of this museum was all the antiques they had and how they paint a picture of all the industries that were operating in the Baltimore area. From a simple radio to a big linotype machine, they had many great pieces from the past in great condition, so that was awesome to see too, seeing all this old equipment. My favorite part was the section where they decorated it like how it may have looked like back in the day. So it was like the theming of it that really drew me in. It almost felt like I was stepping into different movie sets whenever I walked into one of these themed rooms. Also, be sure to check when they have their volunteer linotype operator in. He only comes in on the weekends and his hours can vary, but it'd be a treat to see someone work this machine that was used in a lot of printing. Next on the list was Federal Hill Park, which at one time had a fortification on top of it, but it has since been removed, and in its place is the park we have now today. The views from this hill were fantastic, especially if you're wanting to get a good shot of the harbor area. If photo ops aren't your thing, then there's plenty of greenery to lay upon if you have that lazy bone in your system. Now, after all that walking, I was feeling a little bit lazy myself, and I wanted to kick back a bit while still enjoying Baltimore at the same time. So I set my sights on a nice harbor cruise with Watermark to scratch that itch. I was able to get the best of both worlds by seeing a lot of the great sights while relaxing at the same time. During the tour, they played some recorded narrations that talk about the history or cool facts of the buildings that the boat passed by. The tour passes along the south side of the harbor till it reaches Fort McHenry, where it then turns around to head back to the original ship-off point. After the tour, I went to the Bird's Nest near Oriole Stadium, where I got to enjoy a nice drink while watching a tense game of Jenga. After the show, I grabbed some grub before the sunset tour began. Now, the main difference between a regular harbor cruise and a sunset one is the time and price. The price for the sunset tour is roughly about $8 more than a regular one, but it goes a little bit further than just Fort McHenry. Oh, also, instead of recorded narration, they play some pop songs while you're cruising on the waterway. For me, this was great because I love being able to capture beautiful moments while relaxing at the same time. Now, the best part of this tour was an unexpected one. So after we hit our turnaround point, we started to slow down near Fort McHenry. As folks started to get confused as to why we were slowing down and basically stopping, the boat captain got on the speaker to announce that in celebration of Defenders Day, there'd be a fireworks show near Fort McHenry. When the fireworks began, I started to think about how technically my day began and ended near Fort McHenry. The fireworks were just a fantastic addition to the tour and a way of celebrating the end of another successful trip to a new city. Overall, I had a great time visiting Baltimore over the weekend, and I was glad that it turned out better than I expected. I definitely plan to revisit that place sometime in the near future, but there's many other places that I got on the list, and I gotta hit them first before I revisit some of these old places. But with that said, I hope you all stay safe and have a good one.